Episode 4: The Casket's Secrets. 1. Plans in the Morning Light. Morning broke over Westvale in a haze of pale yellow sunlight that struggled to penetrate the lingering fog. Distant cries of gulls drifted from the harbour. Inside Mrs. Sweeney's boarding house, Detective Rowan Byrne, Cassia Morell, and Dr. Sebastian Harland gathered in the modest dining room, each nursing a cup of coffee or tea. Their eyes were rimmed with fatigue, but their determination was stronger than ever. A single object dominated their attention: the locked iron casket, now resting on the table. They had spent half the night debating their next steps after the break-in at the library and the near confrontation in St. Felix Chapel's crypt. The cult, possibly calling itself the Order of the Deep Tide, possessed the second key. They had shown no hesitation to threaten, harm, or kill to protect Hawksmoor's secret cargo. "All right," Barnes said grimly, resting his hand on the casket. "We can't wait around for the cult to strike again. We'll try to open this with a professional locksmith. If the contents are as old and fragile as we suspect, we'll need someone who specializes in antique mechanisms. We can't just pry it open with a crowbar." Cassia nodded, though her face betrayed her worry. "I made a few calls. The nearest specialist in antique locks is a man named Michel Belmont, about 40 miles up the coast. He's semi-retired, but he's known to handle museum pieces." Harlan set down his coffee. "If we're going to trust him with the casket, we must ensure secrecy. The cult might have ears everywhere." Byrne exhaled, scanning the quiet boarding house. "We'll keep the circle small, just the four of us. We'll drive out there and hope no one follows." Mrs. Sweeney emerged from the kitchen, eyeing the group with maternal concern. "You three haven't eaten a thing. Please, have some breakfast." She set down plates of eggs and toast. "You look run down." They all managed small smiles of thanks, but the mood was too heavy for casual conversation. Beneath the whiff of eggs and coffee lay the ever-present tension that their every move could be watched, that each choice might bring them another step closer to danger. 2. The road to Belmont's workshop. Around mid-morning, they packed the iron casket into a discreet padded container and placed it in the trunk of a nondescript sedan borrowed from one of Bayern's contacts in town. The detective hoped the unremarkable car would help them slip away unnoticed. Cassia sat in the front passenger seat next to Byrne, while Dr. Harlan took the back. Fog blurred the coastline as they drove north, the sea occasionally visible through gaps in the rocky cliffs. Byrne watched the rearview mirror, heart pounding whenever another vehicle approached from behind, but after an hour, no obvious pursuit had materialized. They reached a small coastal town even quieter than Westvale, just a scattering of weathered buildings near a crumbling pier. At the far edge of this village stood a tidy brick workshop attached to an old Victorian house, ringed by tall hedges. A discreet brass plaque by the front gate read, "Michel Belmont, Antique Lock Restoration." As they parked on the gravel driveway, Cassia's stomach twisted in apprehension. Had they truly eluded the cult's watchful eyes? She scanned the street and saw only an elderly man walking a dog in the distance. "All clear," Byrne said softly. "Let's go." Michel Belmont answered the door almost immediately, as though expecting them. A short, wiry man in his 60s, he had a neatly trimmed grey beard and wore wire-rimmed glasses. His eyes flicked over the strangers, uncertain, until Cassia introduced herself. "Thank you for agreeing to see us, Mr. Belmont. We have a delicate piece requiring your expertise." Belmont ushered them inside. His workshop was a marvel of old tools, wooden benches, and shelves loaded with antique locks, keys, gears, and half-restored mechanisms. The air smelled of machine oil and dust. When Byrne set the padded container on a workbench and lifted out the iron casket, Belmont's brow furrowed. 17th or 18th century, yes? Possibly maritime in origin, from the design. Where did you acquire it? Cassia and Harland exchanged glances. They had prepared a plausible half-truth. "It's a family heirloom," Cassia said carefully. "We believe it contains historical documents. The key has been lost for generations, and we're afraid forcing it open might destroy what's inside. Belmont studied the lock's corroded mechanism. Well, you're right to be cautious. This is not a simple padlock. The craftsmanship is fine, though heavily rusted. We'll have to proceed slowly. I'll do my best to preserve the contents, but there's always a risk. He turned to gather specialized tools, slim picks, a fiber optic scope, small vials of lubricant, while the three visitors hovered nervously. In the corner of the workshop, a vintage clock chimed 11. Each passing second felt like a countdown to potential discovery. 3. Expert, hands at work. Belmont donned magnifying goggles and began his meticulous work. First, he gently cleaned the external lock plate, scraping away rust flakes with a tiny scalpel. Next, he applied a thin, penetrating oil to the lock's seams, allowing it to soak for a few minutes. Then he inserted a slender borescope into the keyhole, projecting a shaky image onto a small screen. Cassia leaned in, fascinated despite her nerves. "I see a complex warding pattern," Belmont murmured. "Multiple levers inside. If you had the original key, it would have a unique bit cut to move these levers in sequence." Burns' jaw tightened. "So it's nearly impossible to pick using standard methods?" Belmont nodded. "Nearly, but not entirely. I can attempt to manipulate each lever with specialized picks. However, if it's badly corroded, even the correct picks might snap something inside. Patience is critical." Harland hovered, hands clasped behind his back. "What's the worst-case scenario?" Belmont's mouth tightened. "I break the internal mechanism. Then the box remains locked, or we have to saw through the metal. That would likely damage the contents." He turned back to the casket. "But let's be optimistic." They waited in tense silence as Belmont commenced the painstaking procedure, shifting picks, gently rotating them, listening for subtle clicks. The quiet was interrupted only by the hum of a desk lamp and the distant squawk of a seagull outside. Minutes stretched into a half-hour. Sweat beaded on Belmont's brow. Cassia realized she was holding her breath. Finally, he paused and exhaled. "The corrosion is extensive. One lever is stuck. I'm going to apply a microheater to loosen it. Very carefully." 4. Shadows on the threshold. While Belmont continued, Byrne sensed a prickling at the back of his neck. He handed Harland a meaningful look, then quietly moved to the window. Peering through a gap in the drawn curtains, he surveyed the street. A black SUV had pulled up across the way, windows tinted. It sat idle, engine running. "Cassia," Byrne said softly, gesturing for her to join him. She sidled over, her heart thudding at the sight of the ominous vehicle. The silhouette of the driver was just visible. Harland joined them, voice barely above a whisper. "They found us." Byrne grimaced. "I'm not sure, but it feels off. We have to be ready." The seconds ticked by, each one ramping up their adrenaline. Then the SUV's door opened and a figure stepped out, tall, wearing dark jeans and a hooded jacket. Even from 50 feet away, there was something distinctly purposeful about the way they moved. The figure glanced toward Belmont's workshop, then started across the street. Cassia's pulse pounded. "We need to warn Belmont to hurry." "Right," Byrne said. He turned to the locksmith. "Mr. Belmont, we might have company." Belmont frowned, still bent over the casket. "I'm close," he whispered. "Just a bit more time. I can't rush, or I'll snap something." A gentle click echoed in the workshop. Belmont froze, eyes lighting up with cautious triumph. "Wait, that's one lever free. One more to go." Outside, the gravel crunch of approaching footsteps grew louder. 5th confrontation. At the workshop. Cassia took a defensive stance near the front door, heart hammering. Byrne positioned himself behind a tall steel toolbox, scanning for something he might use as an improvised weapon. Harland hovered protectively near Belmont and the casket, picking up a sturdy metal rod from the workbench. Knuckles rapped on the door, startling them all. A tense silence followed. Then a voice called out. A woman's voice, unexpectedly calm. "Detective Rowan Byrne, open up. We need to speak." Byrne exhaled shakily, his eyes cutting to Cassia. He stepped forward, cracked open the door, and peered through. On the stoop stood Officer Hannah Gonzalez, the Westvale police officer who'd been leading the official side of the thefts case. Byrne let out a breath of relief, though confusion lingered. "Officer Gonzalez? What are you doing here?" She glanced over his shoulder, her expression as tight as a coiled spring. "We traced you through local phone calls. We've had an anonymous tip that your life might be in danger. Something about a dangerous group tracking you." Byrne kept his voice low. "That's not untrue, but how did you find us so quickly?" Gonzalez winced, stepping inside. "We've been monitoring suspicious vehicles entering and leaving Westvale. We spotted your borrowed sedan on the highway traffic cams. Then we got an anonymous call directing us to Belmont's address. The tipster said you were in urgent danger." Byrne's eyes narrowed. The mention of an anonymous call reeked of potential manipulation. "You sure it's not the cult luring you here?" She shrugged. "Could be. But I had to come. We've got an active homicide case and missing relics, all pointing to the same group. If that group is after you, it's my job to intervene. Also," she looked around, "what exactly are you doing here?" Belmont, still bent over the casket, gave a tiny wave of acknowledgement. "He's, employing my services, officer," he said, with forced politeness, not looking away from the lock. "I'm nearly done." Gonzalez's gaze flicked to the iron casket. "Is that evidence?" Byrne and Cassia exchanged glances. The last thing they wanted was for the police to confiscate it, or for word to spread widely. But lying outright might cause more trouble. Before Byrne could reply, Belmont gave a soft cry of victory. Click, scrape, pop. The casket's lock finally gave way, the hinged clasp lifting with a groan of metal. Harland gasped. "You did it!" Belmont carefully set his tools aside, removing the casket from the vise. "That should do it. But please, be gentle opening it. We don't know what's inside or how fragile it might be." All eyes turned to the iron box. Byrne carefully placed it on a cleared space on the workbench. The air felt electric, every breath tight. "Here goes," he murmured, lifting the lid. 6. The contents revealed. Inside the casket lay a small bundle wrapped in oilcloth, plus a slim wooden tube sealed at each end with wax. The interior space smelled faintly of salt and age. Cassia's hand trembled as she reached for the oilcloth. She peeled it back to reveal a brittle parchment folded multiple times. The edges flaked at her touch, and she inhaled carefully to steady herself. Beneath the parchment lay a small gold medallion etched with the stylized C. The design matched the crest found on the stolen bell, Finch's key, and presumably the locket Byrne was hired to find. Meanwhile, Byrne lifted the wooden tube, shaking it gently. Something slid inside with a soft rustle. "Possibly another parchment or scroll," he muttered, angling it toward the light. Michael Belmont, enthralled, stepped closer, but quickly drew back at a stern look from Byrne. This was private, sensitive stuff. Officer Gonzalez watched in guarded fascination. "Should you be handling that without gloves?" Dr. Harlan dug into his satchel, producing a pair of white cotton gloves. "We'll be careful. These documents could be centuries old." Working gently, Cassia and Harlan placed the casket's contents on a protective cloth. One by one, they examined each piece. The folded parchment, inscribed with elaborate faded script. Although some lines were in archaic English, others contained the same runic alchemical symbols they'd encountered. Cassia's heart pounded as she deciphered enough to guess it was a partial map or set of instructions referencing coastal landmarks. The 3 spires, the drowned reef, the watchers of the tide. The text also referenced the final vow, suggesting a ritual or oath. The gold medallion, about the size of a large coin, depicting the swirling wave shape and the letter C. The back bore an inscription so worn it was nearly illegible, something about our bond in the depths. The wooden tube's scroll, sealed with wax, which Harland carefully cracked. Inside was a narrower piece of parchment with a series of cryptic lines in a mixture of runic symbols and English. Where the crestfallen sank, beneath the moon's eclipse, a path of tides reveals the cargo's resting crypt. Accompanying it were coordinates, partly coded, partly numeric, matching or overlapping with the fragments Eliza had been reconstructing at the library. A hush fell over the group. They had in their possession what seemed to be the final clue to Captain Hawksmoor's lost cargo, a coded chart or directions to the location at sea where the crestfallen might lie. 7. The Officer's Ultimatum. Officer Gonzalez broke the silence first, her voice firm. This is clearly important evidence in the homicide and theft investigations. Detective Byrne, I appreciate you're a private investigator, but I must insist you turn it over to law enforcement custody. Byrne straightened. Officer, with all due respect, the local police have been behind the curve at every step. The moment this evidence hits official channels, the cult could vanish or infiltrate. I can't risk it. Her expression hardened. You think we have a leak in the station? I don't know, Byrne admitted, but we can't ignore that possibility. We've seen how quickly the cult moves and how widespread their watchers might be. Harland, anxious, stepped in. We don't want to undermine the law, officer, but this is bigger than one local jurisdiction. If we lose these documents now, we may never unravel the truth about the cargo or the murderers behind Avery Collins' death. Gonzalez pressed her lips together. It was clear she felt cornered between official duty and the pressing reality of the cult's ruthlessness. Slowly, she exhaled. Then I'll do my best to protect you. But if you withhold evidence, I can't guarantee the chain of custody. We're skirting the edge of the law here, Detective. Byrne nodded. We'll proceed carefully. If we can pinpoint the cargo's location at sea, we might get the upper hand. Then I'll share everything with the police. For now, let's keep this quiet. Gonzalez mulled it over, then relented with a resigned nod. All right, but I'm telling you now, I won't cover for you if the higher-ups come knocking, and if you're in danger, you call me first. 8. A culprit. Unmasked? Before they could leave Belmont's workshop, there came a tap at the open door. Everyone tensed, but it was only the older gentleman from across the street, the one who'd been walking his dog earlier. He leaned in, concern etched on his face. Everything all right in here? Saw that black SUV drive away in a hurry. Cassia and Byrne exchanged startled looks. None of them had even noticed the SUV leaving. So there had been someone watching, but they'd vanished. Possibly the cult, possibly someone else. Regardless, the immediate threat seemed gone. Officer Gonzalez quickly stepped out to scan the street. The black SUV was nowhere in sight. The older man excused himself, satisfied that no one was in immediate trouble. Returning inside, Gonzalez shook her head. They must have realized the police were here and took off. We can't chase them effectively if we don't know who they are or where they're going. Byrne tightened his fists. They probably got confirmation that we have the casket opened. Next move is on them. 9. Buried at sea. Saying a hasty goodbye to a perplexed but paid in full Michel Belmont, the group reconvened by the car. The newly revealed relics were carefully re-wrapped and hidden in an inconspicuous messenger bag slung over Cassia's shoulder. Officer Gonzalez insisted on following them back to Westvale in her cruiser. None of them were keen on traveling alone after their near disaster at the workshop. During the drive, Cassia studied the partial map references. Snippets of text mentioned the twin lighthouses or the spire that calls the gulls. Dr. Harland recognized some as archaic references to points along the coastline near Westvale. Putting them together with the coordinates from the wooden tube's scroll, they might isolate an area of the seabed just offshore from a dangerous stretch of reefs known as Maiden's Desolation. "It's not far from where that driftwood debris was found," Cassia said, excitement edging her voice. "If the Crestfallen truly sank there, the currents could have brought bits of wreckage ashore from time to time." Harland rubbed his chin. "We'd need a proper boat and diving gear to explore, and it's risky. Those reefs are notoriously rough." Byrne kept his eyes on the road. "We don't even know if the cargo is intact after centuries underwater, but if any part of it remains, the cult might try to salvage or destroy it soon. We have to move first." Cassia felt a cold thrill. They were close, so close, to the beating heart of the mystery. But with the cult presumably holding the second key, a final confrontation seemed unavoidable. The question remained, was it safer to bring in the police and stage an official expedition, or to quietly slip out to the reefs on their own? 10th. Divergent Paths. Back in Westvale, the day advanced under a clearing sky. The storm-torn clouds of the past few days had finally begun to thin, revealing a weak afternoon sun. Officer Gonzalez parted ways with them at the outskirts of town, instructing Bayern to keep her informed. She drove off toward the station, likely full of unanswerable questions about how to handle such a bizarre case. Cassia, Bayern, and Harland convened in a low-key diner a few blocks from the Lighthouse Cafe, hoping to avoid the more familiar crowd. In a corner booth, over mugs of lukewarm coffee, they laid out the new evidence. "So here's the choice," Byrne said. "We can ask Gonzalez and her department to organize a police dive team, though that'll take days of red tape and the cult might sabotage it. Or we do this ourselves, quietly. Hire a private boat, get diving gear, and search for the wreck." Harland looked uneasy. "I've done marine archaeology, but it's typically a slow, methodical process with a full crew. A rushed expedition in treacherous waters is dangerous." Cassia pressed her palms together, wrestling with the risk. "I know, but if we wait, we risk losing everything. The cult might sink the wreck deeper or remove the cargo first. Or worse, they might ambush us on the water. Still, secrecy might be our only advantage." They exchanged glances. None of them relished the idea of confronting the cult at sea. Yet the tide was turning. The map was real. The cargo might be real too. If they wanted to protect history from a group willing to kill, they had to act. A decision crystallized between them, unspoken but unanimous. A small, swift operation might give them the edge. Dr. Harland volunteered to source essential diving equipment. Cassia would gather the relevant charts and cross-reference the newly translated parchment with Eliza's library notes, what remained of them after the break-in. Byrne would arrange a boat, likely from one of the local fishermen he'd come to trust, if any. They parted from the diner under a shared sense of urgency. Cassia planned to check in with Eliza, while Byrne would meet with a gruff fisherman named Grayling, who had discovered the wreck debris days earlier. Meanwhile, Harland hopped into a rental car to drive to a nearby university's marine center, hoping to borrow or rent diving gear under some pretext of academic research. Time was short. Every hour that passed felt like an invitation for the cult to strike again. 11th. A fateful warning. That evening, Cassia stood outside the Westvale Public Library. A faint smell of ash lingered from the break-in. One shelf had been scorched, either by a small fire or a candle. Eliza Marlowe met her at the locked doors. "We're closed for repairs," the librarian said quietly, leading her into the dim interior. "But come in." Eliza had tried to tidy the archives, yet boxes of documents lay stacked haphazardly. "They took so many of the runic references," she said, voice thick with frustration. "I salvaged what I could." Cassia explained their plan to locate the wreck. Eliza listened, face pale. "They'll come for you," she whispered. "If that cult learns you're going after the cargo, they won't stop." Cassia set a gentle hand on the librarian's arm. "We have to do this, Eliza. For Avery Collins. He deserves justice. And for everyone who's been threatened or attacked. We can't let them bury the truth. Eliza nodded shakily. You're braver than I am. Here, she said, handing over a carefully folded sheaf of notes. It's all I have left on the partial codes. Maybe it'll help you interpret any inscriptions you find on the wreck. Cassia thanked her, then turned to leave. As she reached the door, Eliza called her name softly. Cassia, be careful. The sea can be merciless, even without fanatics chasing you. Cassia paused, heart heavy. I will. Thank you for everything. 12th. Gathering allies. Meanwhile, Byrne found fisherman Grayling mending nets near the docks. The man was a seasoned figure, his lined face showing a lifetime of wrestling with the sea. At first, he eyed Byrne with suspicion, but when the detective mentioned the rumoured wreck and offered a handsome fee, Grayling's caution turned to guarded interest. You want me to take you out to Maiden's Desolation? That's no place for amateurs, Grayling muttered, spitting over the side of the dock. Currents can smash a boat to bits on those rocks. Byrne stood firm. We'll time the tides carefully. We have some knowledge of the area and diving equipment. Grayling scratched his stubbly chin. I don't fancy a funeral on my boat. But maybe. When do you want to go? Byrne answered, Tomorrow night, on the ebb tide. Less chance of dangerous swells. He felt a pang of doubt, but they had no better option. Grayling shrugged. Fine. But double your offer if we have to stay out there overnight or fight a storm. And if I see any sign this is some fool's errand, we're turning back. Understood. Byrne nodded, relief and anxiety mingling. Deal. 13. Unseen observers. That same night, Dr. Harland returned from his trip to the Marine Center, trunk loaded with borrowed scuba tanks, wetsuits, and portable underwater lights. He stashed them in a locked storage shed behind Mrs. Sweeney's boarding house. Exhausted, he trudged up to his room, only to notice a slip of paper wedged under the door. He froze, every hair on his neck standing up. Slowly, he picked up the note. On it, in neat handwriting, Turn back, Professor. The deep must keep its secrets. The wave claims all who trespass. At the bottom, that same wave serpent symbol. Harlan's hand shook. They'd tracked him, even to the Marine Center. There was no escaping the cult's watchful eyes. Swallowing his fear, he pocketed the note. The day of reckoning was near. He could feel it. 14th Nightfall Decisions. Back inside the boarding house, Cassia, Byrne, and Harland assembled in the dimly lit sitting room. Mrs. Sweeney had retreated to her apartment, leaving them privacy. The paraphernalia of their plan, maps, diving gear checklists, survival kits, lay strewn across the coffee table. Grayling's agreed to take us, Byrne reported. We leave tomorrow evening, around 6. The tide will be in our favor around 8 or 9. Harlan nodded, but his voice wavered. I received another threat. They know we're going out there. Cassia rubbed her temples. We can't back down. If we do, more lives might be lost. These people have no qualms about killing. Byrne's gaze shifted to the iron casket's opened contents, which they had rewrapped and stowed in his locked suitcase for now. We'll bring the map, the medallion, and any notes we need to interpret what we find on the wreck. The rest we leave behind for safekeeping. No sense risking everything at sea. Cassia placed a hand gently on the detective's forearm. Rowan, you know this could be a trap. The cult might be waiting at the reefs. He met her eyes, determination etched in his features. It might be, but we'll be as prepared as possible. A thick silence settled over them. In the adjacent hallway, a clock chimed 10. Outside, rain began to patter lightly, tapping against the windows like a cautionary whisper. Each of them felt the weight of the choice they'd made, to embark on a perilous quest into dangerous waters, with violent fanatics lurking in the shadows. 15. The eve of the voyage. They decided to retire early, each wanting a few hours of rest before the fateful expedition. Byrne escorted Cassia to her motel, scanning the foggy streets for any sign of pursuit. Dr. Harland locked himself in his room, triple-checking the diving gear. The storm clouds had blown back in, and a restless wind moaned through the eaves. In the hush of her motel room, Cassia placed her hand over the worn leather notebook once belonging to Finch's grandfather, thinking of all the strange events that had led them here. A stolen key, a hidden crypt, a murdered fisherman, a secret cult chanting in the dark. Her academic drive to uncover historical truths was now bound up with life and death stakes. She felt both exhilaration and dread. She glanced at her phone, considered calling her family just to hear a familiar voice. But what would she say? That she might be sailing into lethal waters in search of a centuries-old phantom cargo rumored to be cursed? Instead, she set the phone aside, crawling under the covers in hopes of a few hours' sleep. But sleep came fitfully. In the murk between waking and dreaming, she saw fleeting visions. Captain Hawksmoor's ship battered by waves, an ominous cargo clutched in its hold, robed figures chanting on the deck. The wave serpent symbol burned in her mind, coiled in endless repetition. When she finally drifted off, her dreams were restless and choked with fog. 16. Dawn approaches. Night wore on, the wind intensifying into sporadic gusts. Rain tapped an irregular rhythm across the rooftops of Westvale. In a dark corner of town, the hooded cult members convened in a small, candlelit warehouse, a hidden meeting place since the events at St. Felix Chapel's crypt. Their leader, a tall figure with a resonant voice, intoned a final warning. They plan to retrieve the cursed cargo. We must not allow it. At dusk, we sail as well. We carry the vow of the deep. The wave shall claim them if they trespass. A chorus of quiet affirmation echoed among them, the candle flames dancing in the moist air. Preparations were underway. Small crafts, men in slickers, a sure knowledge of the reefs that few outsiders possessed. The cult's mission was clear: bar the interlopers from raising Hawksmoor's cargo at any cost. Thus, two forces readied for a showdown in the watery domain where the crestfallen had met its doom. By morning, the final steps toward that confrontation would be set in motion, each side determined to bend fate to its will. Looking ahead. Our protagonists have opened the iron casket, revealing long-hidden documents and a partial map that seemingly confirms the location of Hawksmoor's legendary cargo on a perilous stretch of reef. Determined to prevent further bloodshed, they plan a covert expedition at sea, armed with diving gear and guided by a local fisherman. Unbeknownst to them, the cult also prepares to intercept them, believing the cargo must never see the light of day. In Episode 5, the fog-shrouded waters become a battleground. Tensions reach a breaking point, alliances are tested, and the ocean itself proves a formidable foe. Who will claim Hawksmoor's lost treasure or destroy it? And what dark secrets will surface from the depths? Stay tuned.